All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome and happy Wednesday. My name is Dr. Adam Dovico, and I am a career educator. I live in North Carolina, and I'd say I'd love seeing you all tonight, but I actually can't see anyone. So I hope you are doing well. You are comfortable on your couch, snuggled up in your blanket, and thank you again for joining me for just a little bit tonight, and thank you to ESGI for hosting this event. So I do have to tell you, as I'm thinking about creating a data-informed school culture, my mind got shifted a bit tonight as my younger son was playing soccer, and I was like, I'm a numbers guy, and he was playing soccer outside with his buddy down the street, and I was thinking, all right, I'm going to be just in time for this webinar tonight, make sure he plays, and then like 3 seconds before we were about to start, he came screaming through the house. So if you happen to hear a random noise tonight, I apologize. It's just my son. I think we're good. But I think we're living in a world now where we kind of understand life happens, but he has now been contained in his area of the house. So let's get started here with creating a data-informed school culture. Just a little bit of more background on me, on how we got here. So I am been in education for a little over 20 years now. I was a classroom teacher, a curriculum facilitator, school principal, and work in higher ed as well. And I had a memory from early on in my career. I was probably about 4 or 5 years into my career. And I was working at a school, and every week we had to bring to our PLCs or PLTs, depending on what you call them, we had to bring this red notebook. And every week, this red notebook would come with us to our team meeting. I was teaching 5th grade at the time. And in this red notebook was mandated that we had to collect data from our classroom. And every week, this red notebook would come to the meeting, and my first thought in my head would be, well, we're going to use the notebook this week. And week after week, we never did. All we did was bring this red notebook to a meeting. And it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth, because I'm a numbers guy. I like data. I like thinking about graphs and charts and statistics and all that kind of stuff. But it got me frustrated knowing that I was doing all this work behind the scenes, after school, before school, during my planning to get all this data, and we never talked about it. We never used it. We never even cared about it. And so it became a nasty word for me in my head. It became something I was vengeful with. But as I continued my career, I went to different schools, and I saw that data wasn't scary. Data could be actually very helpful. And then becoming a principal, I saw truly how important it was to use data to build a better school, to inspire a staff, to get people, the community, the stakeholders on board with what we were doing. But I know that data is not for everyone. I know that it is scary to some. I know that it's a little bit of a turnoff to some. But I'm here to show you tonight that hopefully by the end, you will at least be interested, if not open, to using data to push how you learn, how you teach, how we see instruction. So I want to start with a little bit of a quote. So why data-informed instruction? And this dates back to, if you've been teaching a while, I mean, again, I can't see any of you on the screen right now, but if you've been teaching a while, we oftentimes in education have this assumption that we should make decisions based on kind of just how we feel and how we think it is going to be best. Many of us base decisions on how we went to school or how we survived through school. And of course, if we survive, well, of course, our kids can survive as well. And so our decision-making as an educator is based on a lot of tangential things that are a little bit more worldly. So there is a need in this case to push the need for data to inform how we're doing things. And as you can see there, we need to make decisions about students, schools, and education a little bit more informed. So we live now in an information age. All right, we are living in an age where information, data is everywhere. We are We are enamored by it. We are everywhere subjected to information and data. Look at this, in just our school. I'm not even talking about our personal lives. So in our schools, we have assessments, right? We have data on assessments and attendance and dropouts. On behavior, we could see who is in the office, who gets in trouble. We could see enrollments, like who is taking what courses by demographics. We have actual student demographics as well. We have surveys that teachers, community members, parents, students do. We have data everywhere. And the result of that can cause what's called drip. Now, no, not that drip. If you got any teenagers in the house, you know what I mean. It's not that kind of drip. This is drip syndrome. This is called data rich and information poor. It's when we have so much data around us, it's everywhere, but we don't have any information to actually use. It's when we have things, charts, graphs in this beautiful room, and you walk in and you say, oh, look at all the work we've done with these charts. Anyone have a room in their building like that? I can't see your heads, but I'm sure I got a head or two nodding. We have these data rooms that we've built out. So we're data rich, but do we have information to draw from it? What are we doing with this? So as a result of this drip syndrome, what ends up happening is skepticism. And I understand it. Remember, I was one of them. I was a skeptic. Look at this quote here. Teachers are being required to use data for accountability in a politically charged environment where stakes are high. Let's pause there for a second. Think about that. The data that we are producing as a school is oftentimes held against us, right? And so when we are not performing high enough, it is our fault. When we are performing too high, well, we hit this ceiling. And so if you are required to show growth, now we're also punished because it's really hard growing, maintaining and growing those top kids. And so we are then accountable for many environments that we don't have a ton of control over. And of course, politics can play a big part in this, because that's when scores and data doesn't look good enough, that's when schools get taken over. That's when schools get restarted. That's when people lose their jobs. That's when people are put on action plans. So the stakes are high. So what happens? Well, teachers then are ambivalent at best, and more often skeptical to shift to this data-driven reform. And I'm going to say, I don't like the word data-driven. This is a personal belief of mine. Data doesn't drive us anywhere. It's not a car. It's not a train. It doesn't drive us anywhere. So you're going to hear me use the word data-informed more. And so that's a little bit of a nuance, but I encourage you, if you work at a place that uses the word data-driven, see if they're open to a shift, because the whole idea of data-driven implies that it's taking us somewhere. Data-informed means that we're working with it. We'll talk more about that later on. But outside of the skepticism, I want to end with optimism on this opening part here before we get into the examples. So I want to show us that there is optimism in this approach. Right? It can serve as a way for us to make better decisions. It can serve as a way to improve the experiences for our students. Data has an opportunity to help us, and we do it by having it be a part of our culture, hence the term data culture. So what are the things we do, right? Well, today I want to take you on a little bit of a journey through my educational career at Parts as a school leader in various places and degrees. And I want to show you actual things that you can do in your school, maybe as early as tomorrow, to help build this data culture. And no, it's actually not always in the ways that you would think. It's not just by having that red notebook with test results. There's lots of different ways that we can leverage and extract data to improve our instruction and the educational experiences. Let's go to number one. So at the school, at a previous school I was the principal at, I was noticing that we had really, really great teaching. Our lessons, if you walked into our classrooms, oh man, the kids were excited. They were truly, I mean that earnestly. The kids were excited to learn. Our teachers transformed classrooms. They had activities, games. Kids were energetic. They were interacting. It was, from the outsider's perspective, a really engaging classroom. Now, science would tell you that an engaged classroom would lead to, good outcomes. Unfortunately, that wasn't what we were seeing. A lot of our assessments that we took, both standardized and informal, were just not showing the results that we thought we should have been getting. And so we did an activity in one of our PLCs where we broke down our lesson plans, and we broke them into content, product, process, and product. Content being, well, what are we teaching? The process being, well, how are we teaching it? And the product meaning, well, how are we assessing it? And I'll tell you that our process was beautiful. The process was awesome. We had, like I said, all those engaging pieces right there in place. And the products were actually pretty good too. The products were differentiated. They allowed kids to sometimes work by themselves, sometimes in groups. They showed their learning in lots of different ways. But if you really dug into the products, you would see that, well, we were missing something. Their actual learning didn't make sense. It wasn't correct. It was off the mark. And so we had to figure out what was wrong. And so we did an activity where we took our actual lesson plans. We got a bunch of sticky notes. And I asked my teachers to identify within their lesson plans parts where there is content, parts where there is a process, and parts where there is a product. Now, that yellow and the blue there, you see there's lots of sticky notes, and that's the process and the product. Now, a couple of my teachers are blocking it, but if you were to be able to see that red cardboard there, that red piece of cardboard, there weren't many pieces of Post-its on there. And that's because our content wasn't very good. We were struggling, and we were missing the mark on the actual content. There was no meat. We had lots of glitter, lots of fun, lots of energy, but the teaching was off the mark. The actual standards, the actual curriculum, we were missing. So why is this data? Well, this informed us that we were missing a mark in something. Because again, if you just looked in our classrooms from the outside, you would say, oh, they're doing great. But we weren't, we were missing something. So we had to dig deeper. And the beautiful part was my teachers figured this out themselves. I didn't give any answers here. They determined this. And across all my grades, we determined that our content needed to improve. So if you are in a similar situation where you are not currently happy with where your assessments or test scores are, do a dive. Dive into the lessons that are being taught. Dive into the actual instruction that is happening. If you work from a scripted curriculum, dive into it. Are there places where it should be supplemented? Are there places where you need to maybe slow down? Maybe your products need a little bit of spicing up. Maybe your process needs to be a little bit higher. Think about and have an honest conversation with yourself and your team to see what are the pieces we can improve upon. So as we move on, we want to look at another way that we can use data in our classrooms. And this is student data notebooks. So I, like I said before, I have a little bit of anxiety even talking now about the idea of a notebook. But I was more assured when I knew that we were actually going to be using them. So what I did was my entire school, we got everyone notebooks. And every teacher was charged with creating these data notebooks with their class. And so students were put in charge of this actual process. And what they did was they created, every grade level created kind of an outline of what they wanted to have in it. I didn't want to say you had to put this in because I know it looks different in kindergarten than it does in second, than it does in fifth grade. So we let each grade level decide on what it would look like. So each grade level decided on what they wanted, and it ranged anything from assessments to growth graphs to just evidences of their work. Some of them put goal settings, some of them put behavior tracking. And for some students, they got even more specific. So if it was a student that was struggling with behavior, they might have had their own personal behavior growth chart or goal setting sheet. This was also a great place where we put our ESGI data graphs. This was a really popular in our kindergarten classrooms, where students were able to track, and when the teachers printed out their graphs, they were able to track their own growth on letter naming, phonemic awareness, sight words. So it was really exciting for the kids to be able to see their own growth in these notebooks. And every teacher had their own style with it. Some did it weekly, where every Friday the kids knew, all right, we're going to update our notebook. I had a couple teachers that actually had daily aspects for it, especially in math. We had some of my teachers were doing exit tickets. And so every day the kids marked how they did on their exit ticket. And then other teachers did it maybe more bi-weekly or monthly. But at the end of the day, we knew that every kid had to have a data notebook. My fifth grade teachers, they got a little fancy. I don't know if I have any fifth grade teachers on here, or just any teacher that really likes technology, but they said, hey, Adam, can we do our notebooks on the computers? Because we were one-to-one. And I was like, hey, go for it. So they were really big into Google. So they made a Google Google PowerPoint and slides. That's what I was looking for, Google Slides. And they had their data notebooks on slides. So I thought that was really cool, a little spin on it. So why do this, and what do you do with it? Well, unlike the red notebook that I still am bitter with all these years later, the kids used it to set their own goals, to reflect, to become stronger, become better. And it is amazing how honest kids are with their goal setting and with their growth and where they are. I think honestly, most kids are tougher on themselves than any teacher can be. And it was really inspiring seeing kids set these very realistic goals. And when they didn't, we helped them and then try to work towards them. And then the culminating event, and we're going to go to number 3 now, is our student-led conferences. This was the best night in our school year. And in fact, it got rated highest because, we always got to send out surveys after school events. This was always rated the highest out of our school events, because the kids got to talk and show their parents what they were doing. And it was so neat seeing kids just feeling comfortable and confident in talking to their parents. Why? Because they were talking about themselves. They were sharing their work. They were sharing their data, their graphs, their growth. And so if this is something that interests you, there's 3 steps for you to do. Step number 1, have the kids pick data points to talk about, because what you don't want kids to do is talk about every single thing in the notebook, because that can take ages and all they're doing is flipping pages at that point. Aim for depth, not breadth. Okay, so we want to get deep with this. So they're going to pick a data point or 2. All right, then you want to have them set goals. Now, some of them will already have done this because they have reflection sheet and goal setting sheet in there. But for the purposes of this night with the student-led conferences, we wanted the kids to really hone in on a couple data points and set a very realistic, tangible goal for themselves. And then most importantly, step number 3, how are you going to get there? So if I am naming, if I'm at a point where I can name 6 letters, say, all right, I want to name 10. How am I going to do that? I'm going to use flashcards, or I'm going to use ESGI's practice sheets. All right, I'm going to do something to help me get there. And yes, we do this as young as kindergarten. All right, so we've done this throughout all the grade levels, and it just takes some practice, yes, and it sounds different than it does in kindergarten than it does in 5th grade, but it can be done with the proper training, with the proper practice, and solid, high setting expectations. It can be done. Now, I often get questions when I talk about student-led conferences with the how, when. Real simple, you can do it however works for you. I've done it during the school day, and we had parents come in. I've done it in the evening, and we invited parents in. The idea is that students are in charge. There's pluses and minuses to both styles, whether you're doing it during the day or in the evening, because you're always working around work schedules, and then at night you may not have kids come, but if you do it during the day, then you may not have parents be able to come. There is no perfect formula. But if you give enough notice and come prepared, for instance, like when we did it during the day, we knew that some parents wouldn't be able to come. And so I brought in a bunch of just district people and my own staff, like my admin staff, we jumped in as well. And so every kid had someone or more to show their work off to. So there's many, many different ways to do this. I'll say food never hurts. So if you have a generous admin who might be willing to invest in some food, or a community partner, or a nice PTA or PTO, maybe they can offer some food as well. Always incentive. Incentive never hurts. Shifting gears a little bit, let's move to number 4 of ways to build a data-informed school. So one of the toughest things with teaching is you're oftentimes stuck in your 4 walls. You may have someone on the other side of your wall that is an outstanding teacher, and you have no idea because you are in your 4 walls. And I always found that frustrating as a teacher, and I never wanted to happen when I was as a principal. And so I created these peer-to-peer observations, more specifically something called a pineapple chart. And the pineapple chart, the pineapple as a metaphor, actually got used to say it's a welcoming type of gesture. And so the whole pineapple chart was created as a way to welcome people into your classroom. So here's what I did. I created a schedule, which you actually see there. So there's the days of the week and the times of the day. And I asked my teachers, I sent this out as a Google Sheet, and I said, hey, if you are willing to let people into your classroom, write down your name, what you're teaching, and a time. Simple as that. All right. So it was, hey, are you willing to open up your classroom? Now, after I had that filled in, and we had a nice arrangement of different classrooms, different grade levels, different times, different days, then I created a schedule, because obviously if you're leaving your classroom, someone might have to cover you if it's not during your planning. So my admin team and we made a schedule of everyone. So I asked everyone to sign up for at least one visit that they could go into a peer's classroom. And myself, my assistant principal, my curriculum facilitator, my school counselor, and some other support staff, we covered the classrooms for usually about 20 or so minutes, so they can go see one of their peers. We also had a system where afterwards, the person who was observing wrote a nice little note to say thank you, and a little takeaway as well. So for me, I was using observations as a data collection for my teachers to gather new instructional strategies. And man, it was magical. And my favorite part was seeing people implement these new strategies literally as they went back to their room. They might see a new call and response. They saw a new way to shape their desks. They saw a new app or a new program that they can use. And people were literally using it immediately, because sometimes they went next door and they were teaching the same exact thing that they were teaching, just in a different style. So I say this all because I think it's important for us to become stronger educators, stronger instructional leaders, by seeing what's going on in our own building. Sometimes the best PD you can ever get is in your own building. And so for those of you, I know I have a few administrators on this call right now, I encourage you to find a way to do this. If you are a classroom teacher, maybe if you're on the school improvement team or some leadership team, see if there's a way to encourage your school to get into this habit. It's a magical way. It can be scary. I know some people get very nervous when they're being watched, but I promise when it becomes the culture, remember, a data-informed culture. And so when we build this as a way to improve ourselves, it's just what we do. It's not another thing. It's not a aha, got you. It's not a, ooh, this is scary. It's just what we do. Now, my next one is, now I hate to say favorites because I don't want to rank any of these, but if I had to say favorite, this one's probably my favorite on here, because this one truly transformed, this next idea transformed something very important at my school. So we had a tardy problem. Kids were showing up at all hours of the morning. I mean, there were kids going to lunch and just arriving. And it got frustrating. I'm like, if you're not here, you're not in class. If you're not in class, you're not learning. And that's going to negatively impact us. How do we get kids in the school? So first I had to think, well, how do we start our morning? Is there any reason for kids to want to get there on time? Because I know when I was growing up, the only thing I did when I walked into the classroom was either a worksheet, a problem of the day, or just stay there and sit and be quiet. It wasn't very exciting. And as I look in my classrooms across my building, I saw the same thing. They had morning work, they had worksheets, they had a problem of the day. Most of the classrooms just had to be quiet. And I said, we're getting rid of this. I said, we're not going to improve our attendance. We're not going to improve our learning outcomes if we don't change the way we do things. And so I wanted to rewrite the script on what mornings could look like. And so we went from morning work to morning choice. And morning choice was a way for students to walk into the classroom and all of a sudden being able to interact, collaborate, create, talk, play with their peers. So we did anything from Legos to board games to Play-Doh to art supplies. Kids could read if they want. They could, we had some buddy systems. The idea was that you did not have to go in there and stay quiet. And I had a couple teachers, naturally, I know I have some people thinking this right now on the other side of that screen, that it would cause chaos. And it was anything but that. Even my most fearful teachers, after a couple of weeks, came back and said, you were right. Because it's all about the expectations. It's all about the structure. Think about it. If you had two choices, hey, either A, come in and get to play a board game with my peers, or B, sit there and stay quiet, what would you choose? So we had little to no problems ever with morning choice. The only sad faces I ever saw was when they had to clean up. But teachers found their own structures. In the younger grades, usually kindergarten, first, second grade, it was a little bit more of structured choice. And so they might say, hey, this was going to be U4, we're going to do this week. U4, we'll do this week, and then we'll rotate the next week. As the kids get older, they can very easily self-manage it, and you just say, hey, no more than 4 at this table, figure it out. And so every teacher had their own little spin on it, but morning choice was truly a game changer for my school. I was able to, fortunately, through a small grant from my district, able to supply my teachers with a starting kit. And so here, and big thank you to my secretary who did all the research on what do kids like at each age. So these are all boxes that are kind of differentiated by age, but you'll see games, Legos, Play-Doh, art, all that kind of stuff. And so every one of my teachers got this as a starting point, but most of them honestly, ended up going well beyond that. And they went to places like Goodwill, garage sales, donations. A lot of people just kind of went on Facebook and was like, hey, anyone got old games? And of course, there's going to be people looking to downsize or get rid of old stuff. And so people were freely giving them stuff. Most teachers ran out of space to house all that stuff. So getting things was very easy, and then rotating it through. And I just want to show you a graph here, which was really a testament to something. So one of my teachers created this. She said, here is, and I'll explain it here. This is a line graph here. And before that star, so if you see that gold star there, to the left of the gold star is her attendance at the bell. So how many kids were sitting in their seats at the bell? The gold star is when she started morning choice. To the right of the gold star is how many kids were sitting in her seat at the bell once she started morning choice. Again, I think the data speaks for itself there. We used our innovation, we rewrote the script on what our mornings could look like, and our data all of a sudden took a big shift for the better, and our tardies went way down because kids were wanting to get to class. Why? Because they knew there was something fun waiting there. So as you're thinking about if attendance and tardiness is a problem at your school, morning choice is a great way to address this. Now, culture is a big piece for me. Now, we don't always talk about culture when we're talking about data, but the idea of how do we measure culture? It's such a hard thing to measure, right? Like, how do you measure your feelings? How do you measure how someone feels? Well, I don't have a perfect answer for it, I'll be honest, but I know how I can measure people smiling at me. I know people writing me emails saying, oh, I can't wait for what's next. I can't wait for my kid to start school. Those are the things that are important when I'm thinking about culture. And so we call it sometimes qualitative data because it's hard sometimes to quantify this cultural piece, but qualitatively, it's really important. So I put many things in place to do my best to improve the culture, improve the feelings that people had when they were at school. So anything from the magic gate, which you see there on the left-hand side. Every week we had a student that was, we had 5 students actually who were selected to spin a wheel. So we had something called houses. It's kind of like Harry Potter-ish. And each week we had 1 student from every house to spin a wheel. And after they spun the wheel and that was over, they came with me to the front lobby. And in the front lobby, you saw this gate, and my art teacher created it. She found it at a rummage sale, and she painted it and made it look really cool. So this gate was locked. It had a padlock on it, and there were 5 keys, but only one of them actually opened it up. And so I had 5 keys in my hands, and each of the 5 students who spun the wheel would take a key, and one at a time they would try their luck, and whoever opened it up got to go into the magic bag. It's this big silver metallic bag, and they'd go inside, and they were so excited. And inside that silver magic bag was basically just a bunch of dollar store stuff. But that's besides the point, because it was all about the magic, all about the buildup. Kids were so excited to see who got the magic bag. So silly, right? So simple. But it's not always about what you do, it's about how you do it. And for me, I was able to create that magic, that passion, that excitement behind it, all around some dollar store stuff. And so don't overthink how you can build energetic, positive, addictive culture. You want kids to want to be there. And for these kids at my school, they wanted to be there because there was always that chance that you could spin the wheel. There was always that chance that you could open up the magic gate. And then there's always a chance you can get an awesome office visit. So I know when I was growing up, I was petrified if I ever had to get sent down to the principal's office. Like that was just something like you just didn't want to do. And even today, if you ask a kid, you go to the principal's office when you're, go ahead and finish the phrase, everyone, in trouble, right? I didn't want that to be my office. I didn't want kids fearing to see me. I didn't want kids disappointed to go to my office. Not that I have to deal with some discipline. Yeah, of course, comes with the territory. We all do as educators. But I wanted my office, my classrooms to be places of celebration, places of optimism, places where kids felt welcomed and excited to go. And so I created something called Awesome Office Visits. And every adult in the school had access to these yellow forms. Again, very simple. We're not overthinking these things. And on the form, it said student name, what the student did, and just kind of an explanation for why they were being awesome. It might have been academic, behavioral, character. It might have been an achievement of some sort. It might have been growth. It didn't matter. The teachers could decide. And the students then came down to the office with this yellow piece of paper, and I trained my office staff. Whenever they saw a kid with this sheet, they started clapping and getting excited. Then the kid would go back through the hallway to my office, and they'd come in, and then I gave them a piece of chalk, and they could sign my blackboard wall. And then after, if they wanted to, we'd call parents, let them know, or guardian or whoever, and we could let them know that they got an awesome office visit. And so what we were doing, we were addressing a problem because we had a lot of behavioral issues. And so if you too in your school have an issue with high office rates, kids getting in trouble, suspensions, think about why this is happening. Now, there could be any number of reasons. We're not going to narrow it down to one. But something I want to say is, what if we were to start looking at the positive? Because when we're looking at behavior problems, we're identifying the negative. What if we were to shift that and say, we're going to identify the good? We're going to identify the stuff that kids are doing well. We're going to celebrate when kids are growing or achieving or just doing their best. We're going to celebrate that. We're going to celebrate it bigger than any negative behavior. And so we started seeing this transformation. Again, we still have some behavior problems? Yes. But our behaviors went down. Our suspensions way down. And now kids were looking to be celebrated. Now, do we have some that were doing stuff to get an office visit? Yeah, but you know what? They were trying. And so we saw this shift. But the fun did not end there, because if you got an awesome office visit, you got to then go to the Dragon's Den. What's the Dragon's Den, you ask? I'm glad you asked. It was a spare room that I had in my school. Now, I know this is very rare, and I don't think I've ever had it again, but we had a spare classroom. And so I was wondering what to do with it. I actually put the question out on Facebook. I said, all right, I've got a spare classroom. What should I do with it? You'd be shocked how many people said I should turn it into like a suspension room or a detention room. I was like, wait, I've got one open space. I'm going to turn this to a place of punishment? No, don't be silly. So I turned it into a place of celebration, the Dragon's Den. And in it was just a lot of fun stuff that I had donated. Foosball tables, pool table that you see there. We had a Nintendo Wii donated, air hockey, cornhole. We had it all. We had all sorts of stuff. And so if you got an awesome office visit, you got to come upstairs with myself or my assistant principal or one of the admins, and you got to hang out and just play. And for those 15 minutes that we were in there, those kids thought they would have won the lottery. Because you know what they do after that? They go back and they tell all their friends how awesome it was. And now their friends are saying, how do I get one of those awesome office visits? So you see the snowball effect here. You see how positive behavior, positive reinforcement, it's going to drive down my negative data. It's going to increase my cultural data in any number of ways. And through that, I'm building what I call a positive school culture. But I'm going to be using data to drive that. I'm going to be using data to inform that, not drive it. And I want to find ways to help students feel like they belong at that school. And finally, I worry about keeping my staff. We live in a world now where staff, teacher, educator turnover is at all-time highs. We know why. I don't need to tell you why. We know it. But we need to figure out ways to keep our best teachers. And the fact that you are on this call tonight tells me how dedicated you are to this profession. The fact that you're listening at whatever time it is past my bedtime tells me that you care. So thank you, first of all. And how do we keep you in the classroom? And to do that, I put pressure on myself as a school leader, to my school leaders who are watching right now, to the principals that I talk to across the country. I put pressure on them because we have got to keep you. Because oftentimes you are there because you love it. You love kids, you love teaching, but you don't want to be micromanaged. You don't want to hate going into work. You don't want to feel like you're drowning every day. And I know that's how many of us feel. And so I want to do everything I can to keep my best teachers, whatever that takes. Because yeah, I look at my data with turnover, and I've looked at schools across the country, and it's scary. And we want to address that. And so for me, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to try to spoil you. I'm going to make my expectations high. Just because I'm having fun dressed in a rock gear and a headband doesn't mean I can't be hard on you. But I'm going to support you. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to give you some food because I know you need chocolate. And then I'm going to expect you to do what is best for kids. That's how we improve our schools. That's how we improve instruction. That's how we create a culture that we want to be in. That's how we use our data to build that culture that we want to be in. And that's how we get better. So I want to show you 5 final tips. And feel free to take a screenshot here or use your phone or whatever. But if you walk away with nothing else after today, here are 5 tips. Number 1, this is not your single job going back tomorrow. If you go into school tomorrow and say, hey, I'm now the data person. No, don't do that. It is not one person's responsibility. There is no data person at a school. It is a collective responsibility. Number 2, we need to start thinking, shifting. It's kind of like the data drive versus the data inform. Data works with us. It's not going to do anything for us. It works with us. And through that, we can make these changes. Number 3, I hope, crossing my fingers here, I hope that through this session tonight, you saw that data is not just about standardized testing, because oftentimes we fall into this hole of saying, oh, what's our test score? What's our test score? And we're not actually examining the other aspects of schooling like we did tonight with attendance, teacher retention, behavior, and all those other pieces that can drive the other aspects of school. So we need to think broader than just testing. It's not just a checkbox. This is not the red notebook. The red notebook was a checkbox. I got either a check that I brought it or a frowny face that I didn't. It is not a checkbox. It is a powerful tool to help us make better decisions. It is an important piece of how we make our school great. And finally, sustainability. This goes back to number 1, actually, because if data was one person's job and that person left, guess what? That data culture is dead. So we need to build in sustainable, feasible practices. I hope you got a couple of ideas tonight where some of these practices can become the fabric of our school versus, go back to number 4, a checkbox. Because when they become the fabric of the school, it's what we do, right? It's not what we have to do, it's just what we do. That's a data culture. I want to thank you guys for being with us tonight. Thank you again to ESGI. I do want to give a shout out. I started a new position this past summer at my alma mater, Wake Forest University, North Carolina, and I'm now the director of an online master's program for both curriculum instruction and educational leadership. So if anyone is looking to advance their career, maybe look into school leadership and make those changes on a broader impact, feel free to hit me up later on. We have, again, it's an online master's program for both those educational leadership and curriculum and instruction. And if you do not have ESGI yet, why not? Because you need to check that out. It is a game changer. My teachers loved it. It was such a helpful tool when we were building those data notebooks, when we were having those parent or student-led conference nights. They were powerful charts and graphs and great talking points for those kids to share how they are doing with their parents. And so if you have not joined, go ahead and hop on esgisoftware.com and use promo code Dovico for a free trial. And you see Dovico right up there in the top of the screen. And finally, I would love to keep in touch with you. I'm on social media at Adam Dovico. It's across social media platforms and on my website, adamdovico.com. I've also written a few books that talk about education because that's kind of my field. I don't have many other skills. So thank you guys again for joining me on this Wednesday night. And I'm going to turn it back over to Rochelle.
Thank you so much, Adam. We learned so much tonight, and we will have a little bit of time for questions. So if you have a question, please find the question box and ask Adam that question. And while we're waiting for that, Adam, I do have one question to ask you. How do you suggest implementing the observations of other classrooms if your administrator is not on board?
Great question. And look, I get it. You do need an element of administrator support. If you do have that situation and you are willing to use maybe your planning period, that might be an opportunity for just you and maybe a colleague to have a little side conversation, say, hey, at this time today, would you mind if I stepped into your room and just watched like a fly on the wall for a few minutes? And if they are amenable to that, then that's kind of a way to get around a culture, school culture, that does not really support that type of thing.
Here's another question. If a teacher's in a job interview what's a telltale sign that is a good culture to join, in your opinion?
Oh, I love that question. I really love that because I've never been in an interview where at the end of it, uh, I don't get an opportunity, someone doesn't say like, hey, do you have any questions? The answer is always yes, always yes. And one of those questions that you can ask is, tell me about how you use data as a school. And some of the things that I would be on if I asked that question, and the school leadership team or the principal, whoever is answering it, some things I would be looking for is, data informs our practices. We have students that can talk about their own data. That's a great one, man. If I hear that, that's like 2 thumbs up. A couple of things that might be red flags are, because they're going to answer it somehow, right? They're going to try to make themselves sound good, but something that might be a red flag is like, hey, we use data in PLCs to talk about assessments. Like if that's all you got, that's pretty limited. And so you may want to, it's a little bit of a red flag if that's all they can talk about is like, hey, we use some assessments maybe like 4 times a year. But if they can't give you specifics, if they can't give you more examples of ways that the students are, taking responsibility and accountability, and if it's not a top-down system, that's a red flag to me, because you really want the teachers to be the ones empowered by the data. Like there shouldn't be like a, hey, principal, drop all the data down, and now teachers, hey, go use it with something. There should be like a grassroots effort.
Okay. Did you have a lot of staff that were just burnt out? It seems no matter what new ideas we propose to try, there is so much resistance because they are so bogged down.
So I've been a school leader at 2 different schools over the past, whatever it's been, 7 years or so. And it was interesting. I walked into both schools where there was a turnover after a principal had been there for a long time. And in both situations, the staffs they were burned out, but they were burned out in a eager type way. And so you guys probably got a sense of my style tonight. Like I try to bring energy, try to bring a smile, try to bring just like some passion behind what I say. And so you'd be shocked at how much that can inspire a staff. So for me, inspiration is a big piece of getting over that hurdle of the burnout. Now, but here's the thing, it doesn't last forever, right? Like inspiration needs inspiration sometimes. And so it does take strategic management of it. And so like in leadership programs, you oftentimes talk about strategic operations. For me, one of those things is being a long-term thinker and planner and making sure that I'm constantly finding ways to energize my staff. So sometimes it might be a surprise something, that cart that you saw with the candy and the sodas and stuff, those are strategic. Like those are intentionally placed throughout the months, throughout the semesters, throughout the quarters, because I know people are burned out. And so you got to try to find those ebbs and flows to keep the inspiration up. Like we all need it, and more than ever. And so if you're a school leader, that's a way to do it. If you're a classroom teacher, you have the ability to do that. Like find little ways. One of the easiest ones, one of my personal favorites, are notes of gratitude. Go to my desk here. Take a Post-it note. Take a pen. Write down, "Dear Miss Smith," next door to you. "Thank you so much for being an awesome teacher. Keep up the great work." Or, "Dear Dr. Jones, I love the way your class was walking in the hall today." Go ahead and stick it on their desk. It is amazing how far those small acts of gratitude and recognition go. So I think to answer your question, burnout can be turned around, but it has to be sustained as well.
Great. You talked about attendance. Kids sometimes want to be at school, but mindsets at home sometimes form a barrier to that. Do you have ideas on how to get parents on board with increased attendance?
Yeah, so that's the catch-22 with all this, right? Because kids in general, most elementary kids can't get to school by themselves, so they got to like get help get to the bus or get in the car rider line. So yeah, it's we still battled with that. I don't want to make it seem like I had no tardies anymore. Like we still had tardies for sure, but I didn't put it in this presentation, but I actually have a screenshot of one of my parents, because I posted this a while back. I posted some of our data on my Twitter, and this is a parent at my school. She replied to that post, and she said, "Yeah, I know the tardies are down because my son makes me me drive him to school now, so he doesn't miss morning choice." So it's funny what kids can convince their parents to do sometimes. So don't underestimate the power of a kid in convincing their parent to kind of get them there on time or earlier. Now, in the cases where the kid's not going to convince their parent either way, I mean, I'm big on relationships. I think having honest conversations with the parent and simply saying, "Hey, look, we got some really fun stuff that we're doing from like 7:30 to 7:45, and since Mariah doesn't get here till like 7:50, she's coming in bummed every day that she's missing it. Any chance you can help me out?" And always end it with this: "Is there anything I can do to help you?" Like most of the time the answer is no, but just that olive branch to say like, "Hey, anything I can do to help you," that goes a long way. And yeah, you'd be surprised. Like a lot of parents will respond positively to that and just say, "Oh yeah, we'll wake up early, or we'll try our best, or we'll work on it," which is better than nothing, right? So it's a process, never perfect, but a process.
Here's one. I collect
Yeah.
data daily during instruction as a special ed teacher. I do understand the importance of data. How can I use data to focus on student behaviors and academic growth?
So yeah, special ed teachers, man, you could do this session for me, honestly. Like that's your middle name is data. So I think the question is asking, how do we collect data with behavior, if I'm hearing it correctly? And so and I'm not sure, I know there's many layers of special education, so I'm making a very umbrella statement here, because there are certainly like classes for just behavior, and then some just a learning disability and everything in between. But I think setting personal goals goes a long way. And again, I know it's a big spectrum here that we're talking about, but allowing kids to set a goal, sometimes for me, what I've done with some of my special ed students who do struggle with behavior, that goal might be within the hour. And so, hey, from 9 to 10 o'clock, can we earn 3 stickers? And you earn a sticker, and being very specific, right? So there's no ambiguity here. There's got to be concrete opportunity. So if you A, complete this work, if you B, do not kick your chair over, and C, do not break a pencil. If you can do all those 3 things, you're going to earn 3 stickers, and at the end of the hour, you're going to get 10 minutes on your iPad or whatever reward they would want. iPads just seem to be the popular one these days. But for behavior, I know you have to it's student by student sometimes, particularly with those with high behavior concerns. But for me, what's worked in the past is very short, brief goal setting opportunities, and let the students have as much say in that as possible.
Fantastic. This has been great, Adam. We really appreciate your time tonight. How about we find out who the winners are for tonight's? Tonight's winners are Amy Gerhart, Gail Ravarde, Veda Woods, Zulima Gutierrez, and Savannah Ivy. You will be receiving an email with how to access your ESGI license and your Amazon gift card. If you are a current ESGI teacher, we thank you and suggest that you check out all of our new features, including the new IEP reports in specialist accounts and student self-assess. If you've never tried ESGI, as Adam said, sign up for a free 60-day trial using the promo code Dovico. Don't forget to check your email in the next week for your certificate of attendance and a link to this broadcast. Please follow ESGI's YouTube channel to watch previous webinars. Thanks again, Adam.
Thank you.
And
have a good night,
night.
everyone.